Hello, everyone. This is part 2 of session 9 of Pre-Socratics to Augustine, also called History of Philosophy 1. We are talking about the Meno, and we are talking about the first section of the Meno, where Meno, who is Socrates' interlocutor, offers 3 attempts to define excellence, virtue, arete, and we talked about that notion a little bit last time. And his 3 attempts all fail, and so that leads into so-called aporia, perplexity, no longer knowing where to go from there, and that leads into a famous problem that we discuss next class, how inquiry is possible about something that we don't know what it is. But today we just talk about one dimension of Meno's third attempt to define virtue. The third attempt to define virtue is, and you can see that those proposals are quite traditional, not really the sorts of things that Plato is going to endorse at the end. Namely, that virtue is to desire beautiful things and have the power to acquire them. Now, that proposal is going to fail for any number of reasons, but it offers an opportunity for Socrates to explore something that is really at the heart of his philosophy, and we'll focus just on that. And that relates to the first half of that proposal. So the first half of that proposal is to desire beautiful or good things. Both of these notions, beautiful and good, are kind of used equivalently or interchangeably at that point in the text. That doesn't mean that in other contexts in Plato there could be a difference between goodness and beauty, but here the claim is virtue is to desire beautiful / good things. And Socrates says, well, but that is not going to discriminate between virtuous and non-virtuous people because everyone desires the good. And that is one of the famous Socratic paradoxa. And we already talked a little bit about this notion that Socrates presumably held some views that are considered paradoxical. One of these views, which we already discussed, is that wrongdoing is ignorance. That came up in the Euthyphro. And now we talk about the other incredibly famous Socratic paradox, and that is that everyone desires the good. And we want to think a little bit about the reasoning that Socrates offers. This passage in the Meno is one of the most detailed and specific passages on the Socratic paradox. And so it's sort of very contested among scholars. It's something that a lot of people have views about and that you should read quite closely. Now, if you ask yourself, why is it even paradoxical to claim that everyone desires the good? And just recall what the Greek term paradoxon means. It means against, para means against, doxa, and that is opinion. So a paradox in this sense is something that is against commonly held views or against your sort of like widespread intuitions, something like that. So why is it against widespread intuitions or commonly held views that everyone desires the good? Now, you can just ask yourself, do I always desire the good? Maybe it feels like no. Maybe, sometimes I want to do things that I know, maybe sometimes you should go to bed so that you get enough sleep, but you would rather stay up and read. But you know that that's like not the best thing to do and you still want it. And then you think about, more generally speaking, how people act. Do they always want what is good? Well, maybe not. We often criticize people for what they do. Presumably, they want the things that they do. So why would anyone claim that everyone, including themselves, in general, desires the good? This is one of the most contentious Socratic ideas. It is an idea that both Plato and Aristotle endorse. And it's sort of a heavy-duty theoretical project to defend this idea. The reasoning that Socrates offers here is that we desire the good insofar as we want happiness. Happiness is a kind of technical term here. The Greek is eudaimonia. We want our lives to go well. And the assumption is that the good is that which does good or benefits or is useful. whereas the bad is what harms us. Once you think about it in those terms, it would seem that it is impossible to want what harms you. So the thought is that you could, of course, want something bad because you're wrong about it, because you think to you it looks good. Really, it is bad, but that's not how you see it. That is not a problematic case for the Socratic claim, because then the thought would be, well, and then it would still be something that you want to know that it's not good. So an example that people often use in this context to kind of make that plausible is, imagine that you walk to the cafeteria with someone and someone says to you, you don't want the fish. What people mean when they say that kind of thing is, well, they have a piece of information that you don't have, namely that today the fish somehow isn't good. So maybe you would get sick if you eat it or whatever, something like that. So they are in a position to tell you you don't want it, even though maybe you thought, I feel like having fish today. So the thought is that once we realize that something harms us, we no longer want it. And that is presumably a fundamental dimension of human psychology, such that we can, of course, want things that aren't good for us, such as like you want to stay up longer in the evening and read because you enjoy reading. But if you really understood that it is bad for you, because maybe then tomorrow you're not up to doing the things that you need to do or whatever, then you wouldn't want it. That is the claim. So the homework assignment that I have for you is just the sort of fundamental question to think about that. Do you think it is true that everyone desires the good?